So this is Robert Pittman, and I'm talking to John Stokes, and I'm talking to John Stokes about tracking because he's the best tracker I could find on the planet. And John, if you can give us a little autobiography and just kick us into your life of tracking and how you got into it.
Well, I shall do that. If I may, Robert, have you
Yeah.
pressed the record button on this? Are we all?
Yep, we're going.
We're going. Okay. Thank you. I had, I'm probably one of the most excitable trackers. I don't know if I'm the best, but I sure have been around some great trackers, and over the last 35 years, right up to just the top Aboriginal tracker, and in Australia. And I hope to share a lot of good information with you. One of the things that you asked me, and I had kind of a fascinating answer for you, was about my childhood and whether there were signs, that I was going to do something like this.
Yeah.
And were there things in my room, or were there things, and if you'll allow me, on one of the walls of my bedroom, there was an eagle in flight, coming straight at you, a painting by a fella that my father had gotten. And I work with the eagle so much now as a symbol of the Haudenosaunee, the messenger, who we listen to, and the respect that Native people have for the eagle. It's such a big deal.
Yeah.
And on another wall of my bedroom, there were 3 spears that were from the Amazon, little short spears from, I would say, probably the part of the Amazon that's in Colombia. And I walked into a guy's house as a young child, and I exclaimed how beautiful they were. And he took them off his wall and he handed them to me. And he said, I said what you just said to another guy, and he gave me these spears, and I'm going to give them to you. And if somebody walks in your room and says the same thing, I want you to take them off and give them to him.
Right.
And so I had these Amazon spears, and it's hard for people today maybe to remember, but there used to be wild spaces, and children used to play outside. And I was one of those. And it was 1960, Cleveland, Ohio. And we watched them cutting down the forest all around us and kind of naming the streets in the suburb after the trees they had just cut down. And we saw what was happening, but we had these beautiful parks that surround Cleveland, Ohio. And we would get a sandwich and put it in a bag and get on a bike and go for the day and come home at 9 o'clock. My father was Audubon Society kind of birder, and he could whistle and mimic all the birds. You can't imagine how accurately. And so I had this great love for nature, and I had a practice in nature. Mm-hmm. And the last piece actually 2 more pieces. When I was 8 years old in the 3rd grade, I was just a little white boy, urban suburban kid.
Yeah.
And they asked us what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I stood up and I said, I want to hunt poachers in Africa. Have you seen what they're doing?
Wow.
And that's what the teacher said. Wow. Because everybody was saying, Dr. Lawyer Fireman, Dr. Lawyer Fireman. And I had seen a special on strangling a hippo and taking the tusks for the ivory. Right. And I just was fiercely upset. Who's going to protect the animals?
How old were you?
I was 8 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, in 1960. And last piece that's really important and kind of part of my ongoing story is that when I was 12, I moved to Florida. And one of my best friends' father was an archaeologist, very well known. And he would be given access to a site where they were going to build something. And there were Indian mounds from a group that we don't really hear much about, the Calusa of the west coast of Florida. So I was very much into the prehistory of Florida, and I had picked up arrowheads all over the Midwest. So the fact that Indians had been here for thousands and thousands of years was, I thought it was a fact that we all knew. And I was very into it. And I would find things on the beach in Florida. The tourists wouldn't pick them up because they weren't shells, and they were blackened bits of bone. And it was all animal parts from the Pleistocene and older. So there were, of course, the famous shark's teeth, and there were ear bones of whales, and there were manatee ribs and dire wolf molars, and pieces of turtle shell. I picked up those pieces of turtle shell, and I had coffee can after coffee can full of them. And so here comes 2015. I'm invited to Colombia by members of the Iroquois people to come meet the four peoples of the Sierra Nevada, to be purified, to be able to teach with the priests in a plan that they had to re-educate the world. They asked us to bring gifts for the elders of a non-material sort. And I thought the most precious thing I have are those pieces of black shell. They're very powerful spiritually. And I took them and I handed them out, and the elders were just delighted with the pieces. And one of the elders came up to me and he said, "Where did you get these?" And I said, "They wash up on the beach in Florida." And he said, "When did you get them?" And I said, "I got them when I was about 15 years old." And he smiled and he said, "You were planning on this day back then." And I just thought it was so cool. As you would say, how we set the stage for our lives.
Yes. Early, very early.
Thanks for allowing me a long answer.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And you don't seem to have wavered.
What I needed was allies to accomplish my mission. And when I met the indigenous people and how fiercely they were defending the natural world, I realized these are the people that I should be with.
Right. Okay. Can you give us a sequence? Obviously, there's a huge chronology of who you went to. Can you give us a general sequence of the different cultures you managed to make contact with and discuss things with?
Yes. And, I didn't have any extensive living native tribes that I was working with. I was a college graduate, and I did work at the Beacon Press in Boston, which was very dedicated to social action, and I was just a young hippie guy. I was into Bob Marley and some cool music, and but I went to Australia, and I had met a pretty woman while traveling, and we decided to get together, and I went to Adelaide, South Australia.
How old were you at this time?
Now I'm 26.
Okay, good.
And I fell into this college, a very unique college, which had been started by the Aboriginal people for Aboriginal people to address this very distinct group within their culture, people who were too old to go back to grade school or high school, and who didn't have the skills to go to college. So it was a pretty cool community college that had not only rural or urban Aboriginal people, but because the state of South Australia is so huge, it goes right up almost to Uluru. So now we're in the land of the Pichanchara. And so there were lots of Pichanchara students, and I became the country western guitar teacher at the college. and they all loved the way I taught music. I showed the young guys how to play reggae, and it was really cool. And the short story is the elders saw that the young guys liked me, and
Mhm.
I had a cool way with them. And people didn't know by name this stolen generation idea. They knew they were coming out of a horrible history, but
Yeah,
it hadn't been named. It hadn't been codified that it
right.
happened to everybody in
Okay.
all of Australia, New Zealand, and of course the United States. And so I was asked by an elder from a group called the Walmajiri up in the Kimberleys,
Mhm.
and he put a didgeridoo in my hands and he asked me to blow it, and I could, and he smiled, and he
Okay.
began to teach me many things about dancing and animals and all this, and I came to realize how smart these guys were regarding things I'd never heard of. And
Mhm.
so that became 7 years of study with all kinds of Aboriginal people. There's still 100 and let's call it 130 language groups in Australia.
Right.
So when we say Australian Aborigine, it's not at all clear who we're
Mm.
speaking of.
Right.
We can get into that in time.
Okay.
I The interesting and wonderful thing is that I went back to meet the Iroquois because at Akwesasne in Mohawk country, they had a newspaper. And that
Right.
newspaper was a call to awaken Indigenous people all over the world. And it was called Akwesasne Notes.
And this is upper state New York, right?
Yes, all the
Okay.
way up to the border there, Canada
Right.
border,
Right.
Raquette Point. And my Aboriginal students, because I stayed on as a teacher at that college, they adored the thought forms that the Mohawks and the Iroquois were putting out, and the peacemaker and the
Yes.
whole message of peace. And so I went to meet the Iroquois
Hmm.
to tell them about my Aboriginal students. No one had news of each other. There was no internet, and so the Iroquois asked me, "Can you bring us a map of the tribal areas of those guys? We hear names sometime. We don't know where they live." So I became a messenger.
Right.
And on one of those trips, after the 7 years, having trained with Jimmy James, having been with the elders, having been into the sacred sites and the desert so many times,
Yeah.
um, the Iroquois elders said, "We think the world of those Aboriginal people. Could you share with us what they shared with you?"
Hmm.
And so I said, "Well," and then he zeroed me in. He says, "Tell me what you see." So I looked around and I figured he meant tracks, and so I recounted that I saw this, this, and this. And one
Hmm.
of the things I said I saw were the tracks of a porcupine.
Right.
When the porcupine walks through the pine needles, uh, the needles on his body will align the pine needles very faintly into a line.
Yeah.
There's no track on the ground. It's sign. And
Yeah.
so the elder said, "You said porcupine. Where is he now?" So altogether, we followed along the trail, in the pine, and right to the base of a tree, and up on the branch there was the porky sleeping. And the old fella, he said, "We haven't seen anyone do that in a while." And so he passed to the next fella, who was Ray Fadden. And Ray
Mhm.
Fadden said, "So what are you going to do with the young people?" And I started saying, "Well, I'm going to probably teach shelter building and tracking, and we'll do some edible plants." And he goes, "Okay, okay. You don't have to say any more." He said, "I did everything that you're going to do with
Mhm.
these guys in the 1930s. He said, look at over here. See all these chiefs and clan mothers? Those were my campers.
Okay.
So off we went. We started the first class at the Six Nations Indian Museum
Yes.
on Toyota with the Fadden
Right.
family.
Yes.
And some, you don't have to go far to find some Onondagas and to find some Seneca. And so they all came, and the clan mothers would come and watch me teach, and the chiefs would come and visit and see if it was, cool what I was doing.
Right.
And meanwhile, I had some connections to the Southwest, the
Okay.
desert Southwest. And so I was invited to Albuquerque to work with Title VII Multicultural Education to design a tracking curriculum for K1 and 2 in the Albuquerque school system.
Right.
So I came down and I met some Indians, and of course I knew Indians who know Indians who know Indians. And
Yes.
I find myself at a Pueblo one day speaking with an elder whose last name was Coriz, and he was a jeweler. And he was explaining to me how a lot of the designs that they used on the Southwestern jewelry had come from the bits and the saddle work on the horses of the Spanish.
Right.
And then he looked at me and he said, when I was a child, we could identify 400 different moccasin tracks of the people in our community. I would love to see that knowledge come back.
Okay.
Now, you may have never heard of a Pueblo tracking tradition, right?
Right.
And yet there was a Mohawk style. And then I came to realize every native group in the world is the best tracker in their land.
Yeah.
That's their place. That's their home. You cannot outdo them.
Right.
But that wasn't the point. What I was being asked to do by now was to kind of jumpstart the tradition. And one of the elders, whose name was Jake Swamp, a Mohawk leader, very well known, he said, when we ran to the hills, like the last time, we took what we could on our back, and we grabbed our kids, and we remembered our language, and we sang our songs. But what we lost was the training of a youth and the process whereby we used to pass this on. So if you could help us with that, that's what we would ask of you.
Okay.
This led to going with some indigenous activists to Hawaii. And the big news there was 1980. That was 1985.
Yes.
A place called Kaho'olawe, where the U.S. Navy was bombing a very sacred island.
Okay.
And the activists were trying to get the bombing to stop. So I was shunted over to the island, of course, to meet with everybody. And I got very much into the Hawaiian struggle. The Hawaiians were trying to save their language, to bring back their language.
Right.
The Mohawks were trying to save their language, bring back their language. And they were modeling their language programs after each other. So this messenger traveling from place to place,
Right.
taking elders with me whenever I would go, taking Jake Swamp to meet the Hawaiians, bringing Hawaiians up to meet other Indian people, weaving a network of knowledge, wisdom,
Yes.
and really looking at, because of the nature of this thing that's been eating the earth and eating the indigenous people and culture, sometimes a success in one place could be replicated in another. And so we were very much sharing successful ideas that we had. Now, you don't have to stay in Hawaii long before some guy paddles up in a canoe, and he's from Aotearoa, right, from New Zealand. And then he's got some buddies over in Easter Island, over in Rapa Nui, and they've got friends who are Aborigines. And so pretty soon you're in another database, the whole Asian Pacific database.
Yes.
Um, I I got to meet people all up to the North Coast,
Right.
and I think the next big chunk that I added was some guys asked me to kind of train and get ready and learn some Portuguese and go to Brazil, where there are just 100 more, 200 more tribes down
All
there.
right. What age are you by this time?
Oh God, now I'm 50 and more. And I've started the tracking project, and I've taught boys and I've taught girls, and I've gone into the men's conferences with Robert Bly,
Yes.
taking all the skills of tracking into the interior world,
Right.
teaching men how to track themselves, how to look at our culture, and it's an entertaining story so far. These are just the outer details, but the native guys, they were really cherishing this art of tracking, because the
Mm.
desert trackers are really it's the only game in town, and
Yeah.
so everybody knows how to do it. Some are better than others, and one of the things that Jake Swamp loved about it, because he was a historian, and he would just look at the group and he would say, I wish everybody would learn this tracking that John's teaching, because he says, to me, it's tracking the truth.
Yes.
The track says the animal went that way. It did. The signs show that it did.
Hmm.
You can make up any harebrained theory you want, and they do, but that isn't what happened. And he says, and I wish people would take that eye and look at the history of America and see what really happened.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
So tracking the truth. Well, and so I did go to Brazil, and I did now, like I say, we teach one girl, and she's from a small tribe, and she goes, I want you to come home and meet my family. Well,
Right.
the tribe on the left and the tribe on the right, the Parasi and the Bakairi, and they all come together, and then they go, oh my God, we've got some other friends up the road, and they wanted. So pretty soon I was seeing maybe 20 tribes in
Yeah.
Brazil,
Yeah.
and she began doing. She goes, one day I looked at her. Her name is Isabel, and she's
Hmm.
quite well known activist in Brazil, and she is Bakairi. And she said, I said, you just had a little revelation, didn't you? And she said, John, I want to do what you do for my tribe. So
Nice.
I said,
Nice.
well, let me help you set that up. So she set up a mentor program for
Yes.
all of the leaders and kids. And they all came together, and they made flutes, and they tracked, and they threw spears. And one of the elders said, isn't this fun? We never get together for fun things. We only get together when there's a crisis, and we
Mm.
all get into politics and we forget about our culture.
Yeah.
This is what we should be doing. And so we got another, I think she had something like 7 tribes the first year, 15 tribes the second year, 19 tribes the third year.
Okay.
So this thing really spread. I got with the Colombian elders, the
Hmm.
Kogi, Arhuaco, Wiwa, and
Hmm.
Kakwamo
Hmm.
in 2015, 2016.
Right.
We have been to Sweden and worked with Sami people there,
Okay.
and North and South America. And one time in the year 2000, we were taken to the Philippines, to Mindanao, and one of our participants was the head of a group of indigenous tribes, 30 different tribes in the
Right.
southern Philippines. So we met with them, and that included some guys from the borders with Burma and other, places. So it isn't everywhere, but it's a lot of places.
It is. It is. And it's interesting to me because the interest in tracking is there and the network is there, and there's a certain soul connection through all that.
Yes.
And that's what interests me, is this is like the Rosetta Stone or the universal language.
Well, I think you're right. And, again, let's go back in our minds for a second, as the elders would have you. When the first man and the first woman arrived here on the earth, what did they do? There were no signs on the trees telling what they did. There were no signs on the animals that said what they were or what they were good at. And so what had to happen was people had to learn about this place, this planet, this new thing that they were experiencing. So they were tracking. The first thing they did was to go tracking. And then we could jump way far into the story, and we could say that after they learned what was important to their survival, then they knew what was important to appreciate and care for. And so out of that would come your Thanksgiving address. And this idea that every time the humans forget the value of nature, every time humans think that they're the boss, every time humans think they know what's going on here on the planet, their world falls apart, because that egotism is the opposite of how we're supposed to behave. On a planet where everything is giving its life so that we could live. So that understanding is so, universal among Native people. So you get the tracking is the practice of remembering all of that. And then that idea of gratitude or giving thanks or appreciating what's keeping you alive, that's the value at the core of it all.
And that, to me, also speaks about a particular relationship between the prey and the hunter.
Very much so. We have a guy here. I'll mention his name because it just came up the other day. His name is Martin Prechtel. He was trained in Guatemala. But one of the things he used to say is, he said, nobody loves the deer more than the mountain lion. Yeah. The mountain lion isn't mad at the deer, and the deer isn't mad at the mountain lion. They are doing their thing, right? They're part of a dance. And one of the things we need to appreciate is that. And I know this is a killer if you're around people who are into the animals or the rights of animals. And you have to wonder, how could it be that these massive herds of animals were here living with the Indians? And it's because the Indians were existing and coexisting in a good way with the buffalo, in a good way with the deer.
Yeah.
And that's something that needs to be remembered. Yeah.
And what came to my mind is there's a sort of flat two-dimensional version that you're tracking an animal and you're going to kill it and you're going to eat it. But what doesn't come through that equation is when you're tracking the animal, you begin to perceive its nature. And when you perceive its nature, you begin to feel your own nature.
Yes. And not all tracking was to lead to killing. As I was saying to you, maybe we're 20,000 years up the trail now, but this idea of guys who would spend a lot of time in nature studying the animals and their attributes and taking bits and pieces from each of the animals to create a martial arts form.
Yes.
On the snake, based on the tiger, based on the shark. They didn't have to kill the shark to observe it. On the contrary, which is one of the things we could sometimes look at. If we hear that Audubon used to kill the birds so that he could paint them, well, at some point you say to yourself, do you really have to kill the thing to paint it?
Mhm.
And one of the brilliant native scholars calls that knowledge through vivisection.
Yeah.
That's the real white man's way. We don't have to kill something to appreciate it. We don't have to kill something to observe it. And so I've been, one of the things I've been trying to show people is we don't have to tag all the animals to know which one's which. If you get a Jane Goodall or somebody who's loves to spend time with the critters, they know them all by name, just by their habits. And then you go, oh, that's the shy one, or he's the curious one, or he's been like that since he was a little guy. Well, now, you're all together. You're all together in the same dance of life.
Yeah.
So the Aboriginals watch the Brolga dance in the moonlight. They'll hide behind a tree and watch them dance because maybe they'll get a cool move that no one else has, right? So when you see the Iroquois do the robin dance,
Yeah.
you see it comes from fierce observation of robins, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes your mission wasn't to kill the thing, it was to observe them, observe some quality, and bring that back to the elder and see if that was what he was asking you to bring back.
Right. And that gave him also information about you yourself.
It's all self-revelatory. A piece of it is your own survival.
Yeah.
A piece of it is your deep appreciation of the place. There's just, I'm going to go ahead and say it, tracking as we practice it, it's a superpower.
Yeah.
Because you look out the window, and that's a funny story. I have 1,000 stories for every point possible. And I'm on the plane, and we're landing in some city somewhere. And I look out the window, and there's a couple turkey vultures circling.
Yeah.
Well, I always called them turkey vultures, but I met a Yankton man, and he said, we call them thunderbirds because they like to ride the front edge of the storms. And so we observed them, and we could tell a lot about the weather by watching the turkey vultures. So the plane lands, and we cruise down the runway, and I look, and I tap the guy next to me, and I said, check that out, coyote. And there's a coyote running along the runway. And he looks at me and he laughs and he says, what do you do for a living? And I said, this. I see the animals, and then, I'll get a call from a local guy. We don't want to call Fish and Game because they'll bring a trap and they'll take him and they'll tranquilize him and then they'll probably off him, or relocate him. Would you come down and check and see if a bear came in our yard? And so I go down and, well, I'll be darned. There's a bear trap, but plain as day, anyone could see it. Anyone. Okay?
Right.
But I look this way because we're not in a vacuum. The bear had to come and the bear had to go.
Yeah.
So I look this way and there's the top of the fence is all bent down where he come over it. So then you go over and you look wherever there's something sharp and there's a hair or a bunch of hairs.
Yeah.
And then you see where he put his foot down on the 50-gallon drum, jump down. Well, now I turn my head and go this way. And it just leads out over rocks onto the circle where the houses are arranged around. And you'll love this. When you can't figure out where they went next, you drop your head down to the level where their head is.
Yeah.
And we call it to see the world through their eyes.
Yes.
So you drop down to see the world through their eyes, and I look, and there's the garbage cans, or Yogi Bear would say the picnic baskets. So I head over to the garbage cans, and the garbage can is tipped over, and the top is off. Oh, but better yet, there's a little low adobe wall separating one guy's cans from another, and it's tipped over. And it has been raining. So I go and I take the brick that would have been the top adobe brick, and I turn it, and there's the tracks of the bear where he got up on it to look at the neighbor's garbage and tip the little wall over.
Wow. Okay. You
See,
got the whole story.
well, we're on it.
Yeah.
And I looked at the guys, and of course, this has taken 20 minutes or so. I brought my kids with me so they could see Dad answering the call of the community. And everybody's just standing there like, well, okay, that's tracking. Looking down and seeing a print on the ground and saying deer, and I say, well, anybody could, my 2-year-old could do that. Can you follow it? Can you tell me where it is now? Can you tell me what time it came by? Can you tell me what gate it was in when it came by? Can you tell this one from that one? That's the intricacy of it, and really the excitement of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's a whole story.
And it's such a fun way to be. We took a group of Audubon people out one time, and when we came back, I wouldn't have said anything as harsh as this, but they came back and their heads were down and they were kind of sheepish, and they said, we never would have seen any of that if you hadn't been there. We're just bush bashers. We don't know how to be quiet. We don't know how to do all these things, because now the silence and being able to stalk up on an animal, to get closer, to observe it. This entails body training, which leads to a workout, which leads to the martial arts, which leads to Tai Chi, which leads to all manner of healthy ways.
Yes.
Ways of seeing. You know, I do this dream class, and back in the day, I did a class with a permaculture guy, which we called Tracking in the Art of Seeing. And the human eye is actually capable of so much more than we use it for, because we live in a kind of a two-dimensional world now. And we've always got this thing the same distance from our eyes. And back in the day, we used to use the term tunnel vision to create tunnel vision. Meanwhile, the human eye can see all this. Staring straight ahead, I can see my fingers because of what's called peripheral vision. You can train that to where you use it all the time. It's great for driving. It's good for your eye because you're using a part of it you don't normally use. You're using the exterior portion of your retina. We can come in tight, and see something like all the detail on our thumbnail, right, at arm's length. And we can also see an eagle circling against a very high cloud. So there's this telescope aspect, there's this wide angle aspect, and all of that is healing to the eye because it exercises the muscles that hold the lens in a good way.
Right.
You know, there's an argument to be made for all the little health aspects of tracking.
Right. It's huge.
It's huge.
To me, tracking seems to open up all the latent potential. I mean, there's switches in us that we're completely oblivious of, but if we track, the switch will come on.
Exactly. Here's the deal. If we talk primitive technology, some people don't like that word because it was used as a put down of others. Right. If we just take it as primus or from the beginning,
right,
the ultimate technology is tracking, because it doesn't involve anything except a human being and nature. You
Mhm.
don't need any tools. You don't need any technology. You don't need any money. You don't need a base. And it can happen anywhere, anytime, anyone.
And in that way, to me, tracking becomes the ultimate way to train consciousness.
Well, it is.
And in that brings it right up beside any school of Buddhism or any school of mindfulness or uh, remote viewing, unlocking psychic potentials. All that stuff seems to me to be stored up in the act of tracking.
And you are absolutely correct. Two ends of the spectrum. When I worked at the Beacon Press, 1975, they had just printed Thich Nhat Hanh's Miracle of Mindfulness. So
Right.
that was one of the first things I walked in on. The next thing was Robert Bly, Kabir book. And the
Yes.
next thing, I was in on some really cool books, and I saw the idea of mindfulness. Um, I sought the company of Gary Snyder, who taught me how to sit zazen and meditate. And I was fascinated and remain so fascinated with the powers of the mind, because we're capable of so much, and tracking is the best way to exercise all of it. Now, you
Right.
never did see anything like this Uncle Jimmy James, this Pitjantjara tracker, who I had the great fortune of spending 4 years with. That's a whole story how I came to meet him, but he was very famous for having found some lost people, some hurt people, a little girl who had been abducted and stabbed. And he and another Aboriginal guy, uh, after more than 200 guys, spent
Mhm.
a week searching for her. He
Wow.
came in on the job. Can you imagine what a mess there is on the ground?
Yeah, I can.
And they found her tracks. And I think it was something. It was quite a few kilometers in a couple hours that they tracked her down, found her alive.
Mhm.
And if they hadn't hurried, they never would have.
Right.
Well, there's a story, and this might lead to some of the, not only the humanity, but the power of the mind. He and his buddy, whose name was Daniel Mudu,
Mhm.
they were in the Riverland outside Adelaide. And
Mhm.
people can Google Jimmy James, a Pitjantjara
Right.
tracker. And a woman was fighting with her daughter, and the little girl ran off. And they called a policeman, and he knew that he should just call the Aborigines. You could waste time and call the cops and call the Navy and call the Army, but just
Uh-huh.
call the Aborigine.
Right.
So here comes Uncle. And so Uncle asks the mother one question: were you fighting with your daughter? And the woman sheepishly said, yes, we were fighting. Well,
Mhm.
now Uncle knows the mind state of the little girl, or knows something about it.
Yeah.
And because that's going to figure into how he treats her when he finds her. And so they track along, not too far. And they get to the base of a hill. And Uncle says, he goes over to the policeman. He says, tell the mama her little girl sitting under a tree on the other side of this hill, and she's crying, and she should go get her. So the
Okay.
mother runs up the hill. You hear her call out. She runs down the hill, and happy days. She's got the little girl, and they walk back to the house, and the Aborigines get in the car, and the policeman's driving, and he looks in the mirror and he says, Uncle Jimmy, how did you know that little girl was on the other side of that hill under that tree crying? And Uncle kind of look over at Mudu and he says, saw her in my mind's eye, boss. And when I talked to Daniel, he saw her too.
Ah. Okay.
So we sent the mom over. Okay.
One gave confirmation to the other.
So now he says, well, if you knew that she was there, why didn't you walk over the hill to get her? And Uncle said, boss, we know that you white fellas, when you want to scare your kids to come in at night, you always say things like, better get in here before the black man gets you. And we thought that if she was scared and upset and she saw two black men coming over the hill towards her, it would run away and it would have been really hard to find her.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, programming.
So isn't that neat? There's such a, there's such a compassion and knowing about the ways of human beings. And, to be a tracker, you've got to be tough. Things can't bother you. The sun, the wind, the rain, the bugs, right? If you're on something that's important and hunger, forget about it. You're going to go, you keep going. It could be days. It might be 3 days.
It's like a calling. It's
Only,
called by
only a few would be considered a tracker. And now we could back up a little bit and we could just say that in a tribe, you might have your runners. And if you had a message that needed to be sent 50 miles to the next group, you might send it to your two guys that can run 50 miles. No problem.
Yeah. Right.
Well, if you wanted it to go 250 miles, you would give them that amount of time and you'd give them a message to leave and then you'd wait for the answer to come back. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to know where the deer were at this time or if the buffalo had come past that particular mark, well, you would send your trackers out because they travel without any gear. They don't need to be fed. They know how to live off the land. They know how to take care of themselves if they get hurt. So your package is actually tracking and survival skills. They go hand in hand.
Right.
Because the tracker would be a master of survival also.
He has to keep pace with what he's tracking.
Yes.
So he can't stop.
And that's another piece.
Yeah.
Now, that is an interesting piece because the two guys I'm thinking of when I said could run 50 miles, we had two young men come through the Tom Brown School where I served a year and a half after coming from Australia because I wanted to put his style together with Uncle Jimmy's style.
Yeah.
And they're very different. They're very, very different. And Pueblo's style is different still.
Okay.
Well, here come two guys, and they were down from Old Town up in Maine, Barry and Tim, and they had helped to start a run that's 100-mile run up Mount Katahdin and back. And Tim, who was the long-legged guy, they had gone through a whole training, and if he didn't, he had heard of it. But they would sleep in a lodge with an elder who would tap their legs if they put their legs in a stretched out fashion that would make their muscles grow in a different way than what they desired. The elder would tap them and they'd pull their foot back and this kind of thing. They went through this training. And here's the deal. I hope I'm not giving away any tribal secrets with this one.
Okay.
But, a moose is pretty big.
Yeah.
And a moose is pretty heavy.
Absolutely.
If that moose has run a mile or two, by the time you take him down, you got to carry him all the way back. So the runner would go out and find the moose, and they'd get on away from the tribe side. And as that moose ran, they would turn it back.
Wow.
They ran the moose right back to the village and they'd take him there.
Wow. So that involves keeping up an extremely tight pace and also a sense of distance.
Very interesting how Tim described it. And when he rested, they would rest, and they would watch his breathing, and they would breathe like him. Because that's a whole trip too. Oh, every animal has a way of breathing.
Absolutely. What's interesting to me is that a human being can log into an animal in that way. And that gives them, in hypnosis, that's the way you go into entrainment, is you watch someone's breathing. And you come into their breathing before you begin suggestion.
Yes.
And you're describing the receptive side of that, which is entering into communion.
It is a communion, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Fascinating.
We because they have the multiple stomachs for converting the grass, they cannot run as far as a human. So it's routine to the Africans and to the Southwestern Indians, and I'm sure many tribes, that you run him till he collapses, because the human can outrun the deer.
And this brings up certain things that we can talk about in the future, and that's addressing the human as an animal, but also as something more flexible and something that can literally put on animal capacities in various ways. Sometimes I say the human being is the divine pink worm. It's like we never have a final form. We can become different things. And I find that really curious. And I'd love to hear what you have to say about that, and what traditions have to say about what it is about a human that can put on other animals and can be different things.
The human is so special, and we were given the ability to almost to be the ultimate shapeshifter, to mimic all of the above.
Yeah.
And when you put that together with this, incredible brain, we're formidable and wonderful and beautiful.
Right.
But we have to remember that, again, you have to dig and find out where people are coming from. Where did they get their sacred instructions from? But I ask people sometimes, which traditions have in their sacred teachings, "Thou shalt destroy the earth"?
Right.
Who said, "Thou shalt kill all the animals, and you have the right to kill all living things"? Nobody. That's not at all what we're here for. That's not at all our purpose. And so here's, you're touching my passion now, right? This is
of course.
when I was forever. They asked the Kalahari, the San people, why is the lion considered the king of the beasts? Because a elephant could just step on him. Crocodile could just grab his tail and pull him under.
Yeah, right? Really.
Well, a snake could bite him or wrap him up, and the answer was, because the lion has the power to kill any of the other animals, but he doesn't do it.
Oh, interesting. He doesn't use his power in a flagrant way. Fascinating.
That restraint is worthy of a king.
Yeah. And
so the thing about the tracking as I practice it is, I'm moving in everybody's turf, and I'm a white man. I mean, just to mix everybody up.
Yeah.
And here I come. And I learned something so powerful from the Hawaiians that it's in my heart, and no matter where I go, no matter what I hear, no matter what the religion, I can stay centered. It doesn't shake me. And one of the things that they like to say in this book, David Bray, the Kahuna, way of the kahuna.
Yeah.
He says, and again, maybe this doesn't jibe with people's understanding of how we got here, but they kind of have an understanding that we came as light. We arrived in this planet as light, and it was a nice planet and a cool planet to hang out on. But they needed a human. They needed a form,
Right.
to be in, because all of nature was ongoing already.
Mhm.
The wolf was here, the whale was here, the crane was here, everything was here.
Right.
And so here come this fella, this special fella, this human being. And the human being realized in his makeup that he was part light and he was part material body. So to honor his material body, he was told to take care of all living things. Or as the Iroquois would say, to live in peace with all living things and with each other.
Right.
And to honor the light part of himself, he was to show love in everything that he did. Aloha. So if you share your aloha and you care for all the living things, now you're being a human being.
That is the purpose of the human being, is to care.
Is to care, yes.
And that brings out this fact that light itself is intelligent. Light senses, and it moves according to certain kinds of observation, and even physics is having to admit it. Light is sensitive to observation, and it changes its behavior. So we're talking about real mysteries. When light can bend and change the way it reacts and responds because someone is looking at it. So there's this intelligence and receptivity. You don't think of light being receptive. You think of light as radiating, but we're learning light receives.
Yes.
Very tricky stuff. It's like a mystery in a mystery.
And that's exciting.
Yeah.
And just to take that, the cool thing about tracking is it's the practice of all these higher truths. So you can go out on the trail, and if you keep that thing that you're seeking in your mind, soon enough it'll be presented to you and you'll get it. You'll get it really good. So they always say that the light is the great friend of the tracker. And what you're always taught is to put the track between you and the source of light. So if you just think about that, if that's the sun, you don't turn your back to the sun and look at the track. You put the track between you and the sun. Well, maybe it's the lights of the headlights of a car. Right. And you're on a side road. One of the kids took off from camp, and you're looking for his tracks in the sand in the road. So you put a car down there, and you read back into the headlights.
Yes.
Okay. Well, now somebody comes to my house and siphons the gas from my old car. Right. So I go outside and I take my time approaching the scenario so I don't step on the tracks. And what a surprise, there's the tracks. So I get around on the side, I look at them, I study them, I mark them with a couple lawn chairs or just outdoor chair, and I call the local cops.
Yeah.
Who arrive, and I said, I got their tracks over here. And the policeman says, we can't do anything with tracks. And I say, I can. So he says, show me the tracks. And I stand him there next to the tracks, and bless their heart, they do a great job, but I still know what I know.
Yeah.
And he says, I don't see any tracks. And I said, that's because you're standing on the wrong side. So he came around to the other side where I was standing, and he looked and he goes, "You really know what you're doing?" I said, I said, I'm kind of well known for what I do, right? Well, now he could see the track, and then that just leads to one of Uncle Jimmy's favorite lines, because everybody, want to, Uncle Jimmy, what was the hardest job you ever did? And Uncle Jimmy, what was the hardest thing you ever did? And he's a bit of a character. So he gets that little smile on his face and he looks up at him and he says, "Hardest thing I ever did was find a track the cops could see."
More than one meaning in that. We're coming to the end of our hour.
Okay.
I wanted to bring something up, John, and that is that this is April the 6th, and you've got a workshop this month.
Yes.
Tell me about the workshop, and we'll see to it it's spread.
Okay. It is called Cultural Perspectives on Dreams and Dreaming. It takes place in a yurt on the outskirts of Santa Fe, New Mexico. It can be attended virtually, but it's not at all like being there if you can.
Right. Yeah.
It is on the 21st of April, which is a Friday evening,
Okay.
through the following day, Saturday, and half of Sunday, the 23rd. And I basically share the things I learned from moving with the tribes and the medicine people over the last 40 years, because our dreams are a whole other way of accessing the knowledge here on the earth. And what one of the things I teach from meeting with medicine people is that in the day we can learn with our senses, see and hear and feel and touch, but when old people would go to sleep at night, they would have a dream.
Yeah.
Realize that they were learning in a different way. And it wasn't long before somebody had a dream and that dream came true. And then another person had that dream and another person had that dream. And now they started to realize, they have a different kind of logic and a different kind of style, but the knowledge we receive from them is equally valid.
Right.
So now it's not long before a couple guys are out hunting and they're super hungry, because you only hunt when you're hungry.
Yeah.
And the one guy says, "Man, when I'm hungry, my dreams are crazy." And the other guy says, "Me too." They said, "Hey, let's go a few days without food and see what happens." So they decided to go 2 days, 3 days, 4 days without food. And I'll be darned, they had all kinds of cool visions, and the visions told them to do things. And so when they did them, things happened and they began to trust each other's visions. And sometimes it was noted that they should do a ceremony. And from that ceremony, others joined in. And so basically from that, their culture came.
Yeah.
So there's a direct connection. And there's never been a group in all the indigenous people that I've been in touch with over all these years who didn't utilize their dreams, honor their dreams, respect their dreams, and in many cases, follow their dreams.
And in fact, that's even in the Judeo-Christian tradition. The Bible's full of people who dream dreams and have revelations. It's common among all the prophetic stories and all the great prophetic traditions.
So you wonder, how did we get so far from our dreams, or so fearful of our dreams, or so unaware of our dreams?
It's a hell of a question. It's incredible. So far from ourselves, as a matter of fact. So we got to track back. We have to go back in.
And so now imagine, and again, let me just go light because I don't want to give away the course.
Yeah,
but
right.
It's just funny. You go to a beach on a windy day
Yeah.
and you leave a track. And I throw in this little touch. I said, you know, those beaches where it squeaks when you take a step, where it
Oh,
squeaks,
yeah.
and
Sure.
everybody, sure. And I said, and the wind's blowing, and you look back at your tracks, and they're almost obliterated by the wind. Well, I said, have you ever been walking on a trail and you get around the backside of a rock and there's a track that was made and it's set in clay and it's been baked by the sun and it's there and it's there for 6 months or a year? And
Mhm.
everybody says, yeah. Well,
Mhm.
I said, that's how your dreams are. There's certain dreams you'll have this morning and you open your eyes and they're gone, like those tracks on the sandy beach.
Uh-huh.
There's another dream you have, and it got baked in the clay by the sun, and it's as fresh as it was the day you had it 30 years ago.
Absolutely. And sometimes repeats.
So
Yeah.
can you see how the techniques would be applicable to the interior wilderness? And so what I do in that class, this upcoming class, is I share ideas that I got from all the different tribes.
How can people contact you, John?
You would want to either visit the website of thetrackingproject.org and go to the calendar page of our website. Or you could email us at office@thetrackingproject.org.
And
We'll
that's
hook
tracking
you up.
project, all small case letters.
All small case letters, yes.
All right. All right.
So either way, and this is the 12th of those we've done in the last 6 years, 2 a year. And we also do a dream circle for people who just want to do a couple hours once a month, because that whole idea of just being in the company of other people who love and respect dreams is it's a really great learning place.
I get it. I get it. And boy, is it needed now more than ever when minds are saturated by media. It's really important to find out what's really important.
We were given everything we needed to live a good life, all within this package. We got it all. It's amazing. And so just again, wisdom is learning to appreciate, what you have. So
Without a doubt. John, thanks for spending this time, and I'm hoping we can do it again.
well, we've touched the outer toenail of the critter. There's a lot, and you ask great questions, and you know a lot, and so it makes it easy to spill the beans here with you.
Well, thanks. Let's plan for a number 2 in the near future. I'm putting this up on my personal site, and then I'll check on putting it on YouTube. When the Wisdom Archive goes up in total, it'll go on a Wisdom Archive website, complete, so people will know how to contact you directly.
Great.
That's what's going on, and I hope we can do this again soon.
Well, it's fantastic what you're doing, and I hope it just encourages people to help us hold on to what's valuable, and with all these knowledge keepers, and wisdom keepers that we still have within the family.
Yeah, I'm hoping we can keep the connection strong.
Right, mate. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Take care.
You too.